the many relationships that we have in our lives, friendship is a relationship that is quite an interesting one. We may claim that we have a lot of friends, or some would claim that they have a best friend or a group of best friends also in some cases. We may claim to have these groups or that one particular friend, but a genuine good friend is hard to come by. And in this narrative also there is this hidden sentiment which says that I need a friend, and it is never that I can be that good friend to someone. It is always that I do not have any friends. It is never that I am a good friend to anyone. It is always a relationship of having someone rather than being someone to somebody. So when you actually see it, this relationship is always through this sentiment. When we say that I do not have a good friend, or I do not have a genuine friend in my life, whenever we say it, it is always that I do not find anyone. Or it is essentially a gap that we say that we have, or there a certain lack that we say that we have. It is never that who we are, and if we are that good friend to someone that we think that we don't have for ourselves. Are we that? And if we are not in ourselves, not that to somebody, then why do we, or how, or where does this narrative come from to have a good friend? Because if everybody wants a good friend, then nobody is a good friend to somebody, because everyone here is asking for something and no one is really being that someone to give all these askers around what they are asking for. One interesting thing that I also recently stumbled upon, that to have a good friend is to be one. And so it says a lot of things. This narrative, or this idea that we function under, always requires somebody else to come in our lives and not necessarily us to be that somebody for the other. And when we are in ourselves that full, whole, complete individual, and when we say individual, it means someone who's really an individual, which basically means indivisible, not divided, one complete whole. If we are not that individual, how do we think that we can be that person for somebody else? Friendship is essentially good company, not good in the sense of that they would entertain me, or that they would be I would have fun times, although that is our primary definition of friendship, that to have an entertaining company or to have someone to chill or hang around, or etc. That is also included, but predominantly it's like a need of entertainment, or a need of a certain frivolousness that we seek in our friendship. And so whoever fills that need the best, we consider that person our good friend. So when we say a good friend, it is not necessarily in the terms that we understand as a good friend. A good friend would then be someone who is good and healthy within themselves. So for a healthy relationship, for a really meaningful relationship, we have to be complete within us, and then through that completeness, through that depth of understanding, we would form the relationships that are automatically healthier, that are meaningful, that have some depth, and are not to serve some superficial needs of entertainment or mere company that we seek. So here what we see is that good and meaningful friendships would only come about if we are good and have discovered some something meaningful for ourselves in our lives. And because most of us do not have that or do not strive for that, that is the result of this scarcity or of this rarity of good friendships that we lack or see in our current relationships or in our current life. For a friendship to be really meaningful and good, the individuals in it have to be healthy, or at least one among the two has to be healthy to establish that health in that relationship, to establish that meaning in that relationship. And when that is not there, what we see is two parties who are looking for something, who need something, who require a company, most times desperately, find themselves in this relationship we call friendship. And most of us are already aware of these kinds of relationship because there is a good chance that we have them in our lives too. This convenient company that is there when we need something is what we call, or is what we have come to identify as friendship. There is not a real sort of sharing a relationship that we have. If we are honest and look at the lives and look at these relationships that we have, we would see that most often than not, these friendships that we have are there to just fill up the time that we have, the empty time that we have, the spare time that in which we are not occupied. And so if the function of a friendship is just merely to occupy the spare time or free time as we call it, then how do we expect quality in that relationship? How do we expect any amount of health or meaning in that relationship? Because at the end of the day, it is just a mere company, a getting together of a lot of points that are in themselves often lonely or in a need of company. And when then all of these points come together, we call it a gathering or a sharing of a bond or having a certain friendship. But beneath it, there is no real relationship, there is no actual bond that one shares. It is often a convenient situation that we find ourselves in. And if this is merely if it is merely a convenience, then how do we expect it to be anything that would provide a certain depth or ground to us? The quality of any relationship is dependent upon the depth in that relationship, and if the relationship is devoid of the depth, it is a superficial, superfluous relationship that we have. And if we were to really look at our relationships, we would find that that's the case, that they are just superficial bonds or habits that we have come to call relationships or friendships in this case. When we strive for depth and meaning in our lives is when we find or come upon meanings and depth in our relationships also. And if in ourselves we are just this flimsy, going about in life, not knowing what it is all about and just surviving, sort of moving with the flow, if we are stubborn to just live or be or satisfied with this much only, then how fair it is to complain about the quality of the relationships that we currently have. And if we do not seek for any depth, any meaning in our life, something original or insightful in our life, would we really welcome someone who does seek all of these things, who is striving for meaning and a sense of depth in their lives? Would then this sort of a person would become our friend? Would we invite or welcome them in our lives? Because what we are is who we attract, and if in ourselves we are devoid of meaning or depth, then what we attract is superficiality and meaninglessness. So this crisis of friendship in our lives is actually the crisis of meaning, is actually the crisis of depth, because it is not that there is no depth or lack of meaning in general or in existence. It is who we are and what we are, and the kind of things or peoples that we surround ourselves with, in them we see this meaninglessness. And if we are limiting ourselves to only this circle of the things we know and the people we are familiar with, we are cursing ourselves to continue with the superficiality that we have in our lives. And so if in our search for meaning, in our quest for depth, that is the requirement of life, that is the requirement of any relationship, in this search, if we are seeing that what our current status quo is, and if we begin to see it disassemble or fall off or fade away, then that is basically a blessing that is bestowed upon us by that meaning, by that search for depth. When what was rotten, what was stale goes away or is left behind, then what is fresh and new has a place to come and settle itself. But if we are stubborn or hell bent on keeping the staleness or the rottenness and going on for our search and quest for meaning and depth in our lives, then we would be going nowhere, then we would be always hitting a wall. Having this rottenness, this staleness by our side, this meaninglessness on our side, our quest for that depth then becomes futile. It would not amount to anything, because keeping them on our side, what we are essentially doing is not welcoming the freshness, the newness that would give us certain depth. By not leaving what was old, we hold a stop sign for anything that is new or fresh to come in. And oftentimes the reason why we do not want to leave the current things, relationships that we do have in our lives, is because we have assigned them a false sense of value, because the scale on which we assess them, assess all the content that we presently have in our lives, is the past, is the things of the past, of how someone had helped me at some point in life, or how someone was there for me when I needed them, etc., etc. This is the scale through which we really measure. And if in your quest one is really honest, or one really wants to have this certain depth, you would not let the stale or what is rotten you have with you be that. Your quest, your own meaning, if it has any depth, any reality, if our search has any potency, that search would also then reform what currently is stale and old. The search for meaning and depth would bring meaning to what is currently meaningless. So our search, our quest for that which is meaningful would renew that which is meaningless and has no depth. But as we go ahead in our search, in our quest towards that which is really meaningful, we find that the fundamental requirement of relationship that are currently meaningless is to have that depth, is to have that richness where we can truly relate to the other. And so to have that rare friend is to be a friend to yourself first, to see and to understand that what is your own primary requirement, what is it that we truly need, and what we truly need is meaning in our lives, a certain depth that only comes about when we look at what all of that we surround ourselves with is absolutely superficial, has no character, has no real ground. It is all a fluff, and moving from one fluff to another is not what would result in deeper, meaningful relationships.